Welcome, everybody, to a Better Man podcast. My name is Colby Taylor.
Dr. Kim, how you doing, Colby?
I am doing well.
Beat you to it, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah, you were just getting ready to say it.
Okay.
I
Next
like that.
time. By golly, I'll make
I'm
sure that
stealing your lines as we speak today.
I don't have nothing left. Might as well just shut it down now because I got nothing left. Hey, it feels good to be in person with you.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
I hope we're not breaking the law in your state, but our state, we can do this.
Yes, and it works. It works just fine, and it's definitely something I enjoy doing more than video. You know,
it is. It's kind of, I'm so glad we have Zoom and video stuff, but it's nice to be face to face.
It is. I feel like I can interact better, like I can feed off you a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Video is a little bit harder to do that.
It's kind of hard to get the vibe.
Yes, that's a great way of saying it. So it's good to be back. Good to be back in person,
Yep.
and we're excited for y'all who are joining us today. We're going to talk about sex. Last time we talked about pornography, so we wanted to talk about sex, but from a standpoint of what it looks like to have sex in a healthy, good, positive way within marriage. So if you're not married right now and you're in the process of getting married or have a significant other that's coming up, these are things that may not apply to you right now, but it will be applying to you at some point in time. So
take notes.
Take notes.
Yes.
Lots of notes, scrupulous notes. So that's what we're talking about. And another thing that we've added is, we're going to remind you guys at the end of the podcast as well, but we are having you to have the opportunity to grab some of your closest friends, men, or even just a men's group of some sort. And we'll have questions at the end of this podcast that you guys can sit down and talk through as well, that are in the link in the notes section of the podcast.
Yeah, I think it's so much better. When I sit down and talk about something with somebody else, I get so much more out of what their input and my input with them. And I think it's just a great way for guys to, sometimes we want to get together and talk about things that maybe besides sports. Of course, now there's not any sports.
I can't even talk about that right now. This is great.
This is all you can talk about.
We got them like where we want them.
Exactly, you're right, where we want you. But that way you can kind of say, hey, let's go get some coffee or hang out somewhere and let's talk about these questions and watch the podcast together and then talk about the questions. It'd be a great hour to spend with some friends.
Yeah, it will. And I think it's a great addition, something that we needed to have probably for the last 3 or 4 of those
absolutely.
as well. So this will be great to have for all of you who are listening to kind of take it to the next level, go a little deeper.
Yeah.
Like I said, today we're talking about sex and how important sex is in marriage. Some of the questions that we received from some of y'all was, hey, how do you have just great sex in marriage? And that's a great question and something that is important to a marriage. Probably for both of us, obviously men, we need it a little bit more than we think about it more than probably women do to some content, but it's definitely something that's important. So first question we have today is if saving sex for marriage, is it really worth it? In the way that, I mean, in general today, in the world, that is not necessarily what's preached anymore. It's definitely not.
It's not, but I still think it is. I think that, if you want to go back, I think that was God's plan initially, that we wait when he talks about one man, one woman, all that kind of stuff. And so, and I agree, there's very few couples that probably get to that point where they're both virgins when they start dating and go through dating and then marry. I think the couples that I've known who've done that, I've never talked to a couple that said, I regret that. Or I wish we had sex before, or those kind of things. But I've also had couples, and I think this is important, that have kind of, after they'd had sexual partners before, but once they got together, they said, let's be pure till marriage. And I've seen some couples, I've even had couples that had started being sexually active together and then said, I want to redefine this. And so they stopped until they got married. Now, was it easy? No, absolutely not. But I've always had them say, we're so glad we did. So I've never had anybody that waited tell me that was the dumbest thing they ever did. They're always saying, that was really good. I'm glad we did that. And I think it just gives God a chance to work on our lives and define things together.
Yeah. And so much of, especially before you get married, learning about each other is so important. And if all of a sudden you jump right into something that's enhances the relationship to some degree, it confuses things. It creates your mind in a whole different mindset that it's not necessarily supposed to be in yet. And emotions and feelings are amped up. For the female, it's a lot different because the women are emotionally now more charged up. For the men, we're just at some point in life, it's just like, we want this, we need this to some degree. And so it changes the dynamic of the relationship all the way around, where it's more about what you can get and not necessarily what you can always give. And that's such a I know we're stepping on toes here with this topic, because there's a lot of men out there that say, you guys are crazy, you got to try it before you buy it, type of a mentality. And that is from a biblical standpoint, for those of you who are listening, from a biblical standpoint, and that's what we're coming at it from, this is what the Bible says. It says to wait. It's better to wait. And I think, honestly, God's plan is better than our plan,
he
for
did
sure.
create sex. I mean, sometimes you think, well, God just approved anyway. I mean, what does, this is the 2020, whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The fact is, God's the one who made our bodies fit together perfectly. He's the one who made the sensory organs in a man and a woman for orgasm and pleasure and those kind of things. So it's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. So I think his plan's best. And I think you're so right. I think in dating relationships, it's so good to let that thing develop and have communication and learn about each other. I mean, if we'd started having sex when I first started dating Nancy, I probably wouldn't even remembered her name. I would have just said, get in the back seat, honey. I mean, I don't know. But we didn't. I'm sorry.
That's good. And I, on the other hand, didn't wait for marriage and to have sex. And I honestly, looking back, I wish I would have. And Amanda, my wife, she did. She saved herself for me, and it was important. But I felt a little bit of guilt moving into it that I hadn't waited. But there was grace within that and reconciliation, and I had to work through some of my own issues within that. And honestly, it never was as big of an issue as I thought it was going to be, because we had done it right in our relationship leading up into marriage. We had abstained, but I still had the baggage of the things that I'd carried with me in the past relationship that I had to work through. And it's been so good for me to see Amanda's grace and forgiveness in that. And honestly, our intimacy, our physical aspect of our relationship is really strong and healthy in that aspect. And it's never been a problem.
Yeah, and I think finding someone like Amanda that was willing to give you grace, I mean, that means a lot, because it is something that I think a lot of couples struggle with. And because, like the woman that waited, she could kind of hold that over your head and stuff. And I think if you're in a relationship with somebody and they are holding that over your head, you probably need to think twice about the relationship. You've got to have forgiveness and grace, and that's a whole nother topic. But you just can't be married to someone that's going to throw that up at you all the time. Yeah. Well, you had sex before we got married with whoever.
Yeah, so good. And I'll tell you now, sex for me within the confines of marriage is so much better than any of the sex that I had before that. Like the trust, the security, the comfort, everything there. I know she's there with me 100%. Like there is that it changes the whole game when it comes to her. So I will testify till the day I die that sex in marriage is so much better than sex outside of marriage.
It's a lot. The physical's there, and it's awesome, and it's great, but there's a lot more that goes into it. Yep. And the longer you're married to someone, and the more you know them and understand them, and are intimate with them in other ways, it's really special.
Amplifies it.
Yep.
Amplifies it. So that leads us to his next question. Can you have good marriage sex if you did not wait? I kind of answered that. In my opinion, I honestly think that you can.
Yeah, I think it's everything God does. He will forgive, he redefines. It's just like couples that have asked me that sometime where they're marrying and maybe one or both have had a divorce. Well, can we have as good a marriage? And my belief is when you stand at the altar and you commit to each other with your vows before God, he is all in.
Oh, yeah.
He is like, I'm going to make this everything you allow me to do, whether it's sex, whether it's any of those things. And so, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, to me, that's just kind of and it does take it from the approach of the other person. And there's not just women that have waited. Sometimes men have waited and the women have not.
Absolutely.
There has to be that. It's almost just that other partner looking past that and saying that's not who I'm marrying, and moving past that and making that relationship better in that regards, because that's really where a lot of that changes too, if they're not willing to forgive you, like you said at the beginning. But
it does go both ways. And I've had that situation where a guy was engaged to a woman that had been sexually active before. He had a lot to work through, but he had to work through that, or he couldn't have had, I think, what God wanted for him to be married. He had to work through that. I saved myself, she didn't. How do I handle that, deal with that? How do I deal with her having sex with someone else before? But he was able to do that, and God brought healing in that area.
Yeah. Same thing we talked about pornography last time. It's the same thing with pornography. And he may not have had sexual relationships with any woman physically, but emotionally, mentally, and I had to walk through that within our relationship at the beginning of my mind and changing, working through some of that stuff when it comes to that because of my baggage with that. So, but the same thing goes true. You can still overcome that and have great sex within your marriage. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to that, there's a lot of men today that think that you have to have a lot of partners makes you such a man. If you're a man's man, if you've had lots of sex, in my opinion, all that means is you probably have an STD somewhere along the lines. It doesn't matter about if you're more of a man, you just have more STDs. That's kind of how I look at it. But there's a lot of men that think that you have to be sexually active. That makes you more of who more manly, more masculine. Sowing that seed, right?
Yeah.
Not true.
No, but I think there really are some cultural areas or maybe environments that people grow up in where that's kind of the deal. I mean, I had a guy that was a good friend of one of my brother-in-laws that before he got married, his dad took him to where some hookers were. Yeah. Do you think he'll take your boys to do that for
No,
them?
it definitely never crossed my mind.
No.
But
but that culture of that family was, well, the men, we got to blah, blah,
so
blah.
he took him to hook him up, like basically a prostitute.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that kind of shut this one down. That's all right,
That is, I have never heard that before.
But the point I wanted to make is that there are some people that we really wouldn't understand that they would even think like that. And so some guys may have grown up in that or be exposed to that. I've had guys that have grown up and the porn was laying out. It may have been Playboy as opposed to something more graphic, but it was still there, like on the coffee table when they walk by it every day. And so if you grow up in that environment, there's you have a lot of really lies about sex that go in your mind that you have to overcome.
Yeah. I can definitely see that from a standpoint of where you do feel like masculinity is defined by the way that you are performing sexually or the number of people that you have sexually. But at the same time, the amount of, and you've said this, I would be very curious, and maybe you've talked to them, but how those men respond to that as they've gotten older, realizing that that's not necessarily.
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yeah, I think so, and especially, and I think it's where it goes back to something we talk about quite a bit, and that's our identity comes in Christ. If your identity is because you've got so many notches on your belt, well, then your whole identity is that. And so what I've seen with some guys, you get the notch on your belt, and then you're supposed to live with one person the rest of your life, and they want to get some more notches, and so they get in trouble. So I think it's knowing that your identity comes in a relationship with Christ, and as you do that, he's not. I pray every day that my sexual desire is only for Nancy, and God honors that, and it solidifies that. And so I think if guys that have been in some of those situations, knowing that, or whether it's been pornography or promiscuity or whatever it has been, just let God redefine that for you. It will be amazing what you can have in your sexual life and marriage when you do that.
Yeah. And so much of what you're saying also is a change in the heart and the mindset, because a lot of men, because of that relationship with Jesus, because of how that changes the way that they view and think about things, and he comes in, makes you old, the old is gone, the new has come. But I know a lot of men that don't have a relationship with Jesus that have had sexual, and yes, but there's some regret there at the same time of saying, hey, this is not, because now I'm in a relationship with a woman, and we're committed, and everything's great and strong, but I don't feel like, but I still have these things in the back of my mind where I want to accomplish these things, and like you said, notches in the belt. But there is, in spite of the fact that they don't have a relationship with Jesus, or that's not a conviction thing, they still feel a little bit of guilt and conviction and having some issues with that because of it.
Yeah, I think so, because we're so visual. And those images, I don't think when guys are growing up or looking at porn or being with other women, think about how those are getting stuck in their mind. But guys that tell me they do, and then they want to have sex with their wife, which they do, but they got to work through all that junk. So if you've been there, maybe consider working through the junk. And if you haven't been there yet, don't go there. And
I'll say this: the way that we're made, you can argue with me till the day you die, but we are made to have relationships with one person and to be intimate with that one person. That's what we desire and that we crave, no matter whether you believe in God or Jesus or you don't believe in Jesus. Like, you are still wired that way. In the back of your mind, no matter how you try to fight it, all the relationships, notches in the belt, won't matter. You still desire that intimacy, that one-on-one relationship with a wife.
Yeah, I mean, God didn't create Adam and then Eve and Betty and Mary and Sue, in the Garden of Eden. It was Adam and Eve. It was one-on-one.
Yeah, and that's just how we're created. You can't argue that. So we've talked about men, and we understand ourselves pretty well, being men ourselves, but women are a whole different ballgame. It's that crock pot and microwave concept perspective, and you do a really good job of talking about what it looks like from a sexual standpoint within a relationship. So what does it look like for women when it comes to sex? How do women approach sex?
Well, this is...
Because it's important for us to know this.
Talking to a lot of women over a lot of years, It wasn't something that I just had. I think the whole deal, it's such a relational thing for women. Women get turned on by the physical too. I mean, they like their guy to look hot. I mean, there's nothing, but it's a little bit different, I think, than when we look at a woman and think she's hot. I think ties into her emotions, and she wants that relationship. And so when you look at the things that are important in the sexual relation, a woman really wants to be able to trust that person. I mean, when you really think about a woman, how vulnerable she is in sex.
Yeah.
I mean, she really is. I mean, you're bigger, you're stronger, whatever position you're in. I mean, you are bigger and stronger. Don't go there. And so, and she wants to know that your commitment. And when she has those things in place, she just kind of opens up and is able to give herself completely. Otherwise, I think women can kind of hold back a little bit if they don't have that complete trust in a man. A man doesn't go there. I mean, you don't have to trust a woman to have sex with her. I've heard people say. I mean, we're a woman.
That's true. It's crude.
It is crude, but it's
true.
just one of the differences there between us and our wives. And so I think just accepting that. I don't know that guys that we ever totally understand that because we are so different, but I think when we come to the point and say, okay, that's the way she is, then we can work on the relational part of it. Then we can work on identifying with her emotions, and I'll guarantee you, because this is from experience, your sex life will be better.
Yeah.
You meet her where she is, she's going to meet you where you are, and rockets go off.
Yep. And I guarantee if you're in my opinion, if you're in a lacking relationship when it comes to sexually, and you guys have kind of had a wall sexually within your marriage, within your relationship, there's probably something going on with both of you, where both of you aren't meeting each other's needs. A lot of times you can fix yourself, you can change yourself. You can't really fix your spouse necessarily and make them do the things that you want, but you can do things to make them feel more loved and more taken. And women, like you said, are all about the little service things, the opportunities to make them feel like emotionally that they're connected. My wife, Amanda, she tells me, and it drives me crazy when she tells me this, but it's true, it's a good indication. She goes, hey, we're roommates. I feel like we're roommates. And I'm like, I don't feel like we're roommates. I feel like, I understand that. We're married. We're living together. And that comes to the fact that we're not communicating well. We're not having time together. The kids are going crazy. That's a good indication that I'm not doing my end of the job. And not necessarily because of anything I'm doing wrong.
Right.
Sometimes it's just out of my control, or things are just crazy.
Yep.
That's a good indication that I'm not meeting my wife's needs. And there's a reason why we're not having any type of physical intimacy. It's because I'm not connected with her. And one thing that you said is the smell too. Talk about that, because I think that's interesting. When you talk about the cologne, you smell good. Remember on your...
yeah.
I think but I don't smell good very often. I was like, that's a really
women,
easy...
and Nancy, maybe, and I think most women do, they want you to smell good.
Yeah.
And so, but I've had guys that I've taught that to, and so they go out and buy old elk musk or something, and they tell me it didn't work. Well, of course it didn't work. I mean, if you're going to buy cologne and she wants you to wear it, let her go with you and let her pick it out. She's the one smelling it. You're not going to smell it. And so, I think that's it. The thing is, when we take those steps for her, that means a lot to her. It means a lot that we care enough to try to do that. If she wants you to shower before. I mean, don't argue those points. Just do what she asks you to do, and I don't think you'll ever regret that.
There's certain hills you have to die on, and that's, to me, is
that
just
is
those
not
are
when
minor
you die on.
hills. That's not a sword. You don't have to die on your sword on that one.
No.
So good. I like the thought about the smells, because and I put that to practice. I'm like, I need to put a little bit of cologne here and there.
Obviously, you didn't wear any today.
No. I don't even use deodorant.
No,
With you, it's a whole different ballgame. I'm like,
you don't care.
I want to see how much you can take.
We've been out working now.
See, will he get up? Will he stick by me, or will he get up and move? How much can he take?
I don't know.
Is foreplay then in the marriage thing wrong?
No.
I'm glad you said that, because I
think
so either.
I think foreplay is. I love foreplay. I mean, I think it's that part. I think sometimes, and I get it, I say this a lot, I think the United States have been in the quickie, but I think sometimes, which is great, because you don't have much time sometimes, and maybe you're both kind of turned on, and so go for it, you got 3 minutes or something like that. But I think taking the time where you can really enjoy each other, where you can maybe rub lotion on each other, where you can massage, where you can take a shower or bath together, where you touch each other, all those kind of things, I think just heighten it. And I think our bodies are there's touch receptors all over our bodies, not just in our sexual areas. And so I think all of that just can enhance the sexual relationship. And there's another level of intimacy, I think, that comes with that. So don't miss out on that. And I get it when you got 6 kids running around. So there's maybe not always a lot of time for foreplay, but make those times sometime. And it may be where you have to get away to do some of those things. Yeah. But don't miss out on that, because it's a really important part.
And for men, foreplay is different than women at the same time, right? Because women are going to have a little bit more of an emotional attachment to whatever the foreplay
Yep.
is. And like, I'm not big on rubbing lotion on my wife, but I know at some point in time that's important to her. Or
Yes.
sitting down and talking in the bed. We may not have clothes on, which is always challenging. If my wife's listening to this, I'm so sorry. Maybe more information than need to, but that's challenging. But for her, it's an important part of the foreplay aspect of things. I'm taking it slowly. I'm listening to her. I'm talking to her and moving it. Not just like, yeah, all right, let's get going.
Yeah, well, and that's our first impulse. I mean, we're just guys. But I think all that's wisdom that you're saying right there, and I think I love what you said, just sharing that. I hope Amanda doesn't care, because find out what's important to her. And when you do that, it's great. And she knows. I mean, Nancy and I have been married 50 years, but I still don't know everything about her, and I've got to ask her. And so if I ask her something like that and she responds, then I can do what she asks.
Yeah.
And I think, too, our wives probably change over time. I think at the time right now where Amanda's mind is with sex, with 6 kids, is different than it's going to be when the last kid leaves.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm just saying, because her mind is, a woman's sex organ is right here. It's in her mind. And so, man, I can't imagine with 6 kids. It was bad enough when we had 2. For Nancy to, they got to be asleep, they got to be this. Did I hear a cough? Those kind of things.
I had to change the lock on our door at our bedroom because you could jimmy it from the outside and open the door. And so I had to change it. So there's no way that there's any chance that they would never walk in, but at least hypothetically speaking, but in her mind,
It needs to be.
I need to lock it. So we had to change that, which helps.
I don't know how many times I heard, did you lock the door? That's important to her. So I made sure the door was locked.
So it's not just a man.
Which was probably stupid if the kids were teenagers, because their rooms were right outside ours. And so here's Dad closing the door and locking it. It's like, well, there they go again, I'm sure.
I don't know how, I don't know. Because they were talking about that when, I could tell you, I have a story, but I'm not going to share that. I'll save that my parents anyway. That would embarrass them. But when it comes to kids and the older that you get and trying to find that, when do you start? I know of some couples that tell their kids that, hey, we're going to go off and have sex right now. So you guys have how do you, for those of us who have kids, how do you communicate?
Yeah, I think it's age appropriate.
Okay.
Or you can say, this is a time that Mom and Dad just want to be together.
Yeah.
And we like
wrestle
to be
naked for a while.
You could say that. But I think our kids need to know that is an important part of our life. That is a gift that God gave us. You don't want them to grow up with a negative attitude about sex. And so, no, you don't want to get visual or anything, but you want them to know that that's an important part of your life, because you want that to be an important part of their life when they're married.
Yeah. Yeah, and I however you want to communicate it in that way, letting the kids know that this is what our kids are getting to the point now where they're starting to understand and learn and want to know more about this stuff. And so it is an important aspect of how do we communicate that with grace, with wisdom, but also with it's appropriate. This is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing that God created.
And that is a private thing between a husband and a wife, and you can say that too.
Yeah, I agree. And we're learning this, so I'm going to be talking to you a lot when it comes to how to address this with our kids too. That's a whole different conversation that we might want to talk about at some point in time. I think that'd be fun. And one of the things that I know from my wife and I is when it comes to sex, how often do I get it? I've been under the guise, kind of the routine of every 3 days for me is a typical cycle. This is what I need. I need every 3 days to have sex. Does it happen like that all the time? No. But I know that in my mind, that is a good routine.
Kind of your rhythm.
That's a good rhythm for me to have.
So I think you're right. And I think most guys, if you're honest, have that kind of, where it just, I don't know, I think it's physiological, but I don't know what it is, but it seems like most guys have that. I think first you communicate in a loving way that to your wife. When you guys, and you got to talk to each other about sex, what you like, don't like. That I think that's something important. So at least she knows that. And when I would share something with Nancy sometimes, then she'd feel guilty if we didn't, and I didn't want her to do that. So I had to do a lot of work to help her not to feel guilty if that day passed and whatever. But I think that's something you talk about and try to keep it realistic and know that's, and especially like when Amanda, to know that, okay, every 3 days, that's something that's important to Colby, that she can at least have that in her mind, and how do I make that happen?
It is good. I'm guilty of this. I'm a guilt tripper at times with that. And so if it's been a while and I've tried things and nothing's happening and there's obviously things going on there that are beyond sometimes my control of what happens. But how do you lay into how to have a conversation with some like, hey, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but I need a little something, and it's been a while, and I've told you these needs. How do you communicate? I've never thought about, and showing them grace, like, okay, I know it's been past the time, like you were saying. How do you?
Well, I think the other thing, just like we talked about, it's not going to be on her mind like it is on yours. So I think, and that's why I think you want to have a conversation before, hey, if it's been a few extra days and we haven't, is it okay with you? I'll bring it up. So you kind of go ahead and get her permission to do that when, ahead of time so you can talk about it. And then I think it's just, it's okay to bring it up. I mean, it's okay to bring it up. It's okay to have those conversations. But I think I told Nancy that I said, I don't want you to feel guilty. I want to be able to tell you, but I don't want you to feel guilty if I don't. And just because the way she was wired, it took her a while to get there. Yeah. Probably what I did the first 3 or 4 years of marriage damaged her because if she wouldn't, I'd tell her I heard all the next day. And that went well for a while. And then she kind of talked to someone and figured out that wasn't true. So the 3 or 4 years was awesome, man. Yeah.
I haven't tried that one. I still have, I haven't used it yet. Maybe I can utilize that and see if it lasts for 3 or 4 years.
Tell her, yeah.
Obviously, you guys still together.
Tell her I just brought it up today in the show and that you just thought, well, that's why I've been hurting. See what she says.
Oh boy,
we should talk about sex all the time.
I think that this is great. I'm learning a lot.
I am too.
I'm learning a lot. So is it with all of that when we're communicating the fact that I do need, and like you said, in a way that's good, I do feel like at some point in time you do have to say, okay, why isn't this happening? I feel like I've done X, Y, and Z. Let's have a conversation because there's something going on that I'm not aware of. And it might be, sometimes it's on her. I have a tendency to put it all on me, like I've done something wrong, and then I create this false reality in my mind, like, oh, I'm doing this wrong, or and it spins out of control, when sometimes it's really just her, and I've not done anything to do that.
Something going on in her mind, something she's thinking about,
she's stressed out, worried about
something
stuff.
With kids, things like that, that maybe she hadn't shared with you yet. There is a great tool in Awesome Marriage. If they go to the awesomemarriage.com and go to the resources drop down, there's a talking together about sex or something like that. You'll see it in there. But it's a printout that you can do, and you just go through it, and it gives you a kind of a tool there to talk about your sexual relationship, what you like, what you don't like, and talk about things like frequency and things like that. So if you want to jump start to that, because sometimes it is kind of awkward, and so it's get that, and then that might be a good jump start for you. Yeah. But you got to talk about sex. And
it's good for those of you that definitely going on there and checking that out. Because sometimes I know for me, visual, okay, what are the points? How do they make that? And I know for me, and we're talking about communication and talking about this, there is nothing wrong with her and I communicating about our desires for sex within confines of, there's parameters of, I think, when it comes to sexual intimacy, of things that you do and you just do not do. That's just not how our bodies were made. But there are, if you have desires and fantasies, and communicate that with your spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And because that's what I tell women, let him tell you. You can say no. Yeah. But let him tell you some of his fantasies. And I've been laughed at before, but that's okay.
I think it's great. And you tell a story of a couple that tried that, and she ended up getting hurt because she was trying to surprise him with something and fell and slipped and hit her head or something like that.
And everybody has funny sex stories. If you've been long enough, some things that have happened that are just really funny.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't share that when you were thinking, weren't you?
I was. Yeah, I stopped. I didn't want to share my funny ones. We might not have anybody listening to it.
Or you might not have a wife to home to.
Hey, this time, Amanda, I don't think you need to listen to this one.
Yeah, this is
just for men only. I don't think you need to check this one out.
This is not a good one for you to be part of.
It wouldn't have gone over.
One of the things we talked about, the first is getting together with other guys. And we're going to have questions for you. It's going to be on the talk notes, or if you subscribe, you'll get them automatically. But just to get with some other guys or another accountability partner or something, listen to the podcast and then talk about these questions, because guys, we just don't do a very good job about talking about sex. For whatever reason, we don't do a very good job. Whether we
maybe talking in general about anything that's deeply seated, or something that's personal.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to, I don't know. I mean, I used to think, well, I'm supposed to know everything about sex. I'm a guy, so why would I ask somebody else? Well, I needed to talk to some other guys. I needed to find out, am I thinking right in this? Or is my wife, is she different, or is she like other women? And so not that you share deep secrets about your intimacy and stuff, but just sharing in general, that it helps. And it helps to sit down and talk about this with other guys. This gives you a great tool to sit down and get a cup of coffee or just hang out with some guys and just talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I was reading through the Bible, we were talking, and it was talking about David and Jonathan and the relationship they had. I do think when you're talking about having these conversations, David and Jonathan had this really intimate relationship that was really close. And I read through Abraham Lincoln's biography and some of the things he did. A lot of men around him also had really close, intimate relationship with men, better than we are doing today. And they had these conversations about stuff like this all the time. That just, in fact, they even slept in the same bed together as roommates. Like they sit there and I don't know, that's a little bit too far for me, but that was just expected and normal, and it wasn't weird. And there has been a little bit of. There's been a shift in how do you grow intimately with friends. And I struggle with it too. It's hard for me to do that. But I do think there's something here, especially when you're talking about things like sex or issues you're having within your marriage, that you need to be able to open up and talk about that with your people, with your friends, specifically guys that you can lean into and really trust. That's a big deal. We've talked about that in the past, but those questions are going to really help. I think
just step up and initiate. Grab a couple guys and say, hey, you want to do this with me? I think they'll say yes.
Oh, absolutely, because they're probably wanting the same thing.
Yeah. Somebody's got to step forward.
Take the bull by the horns. Well, it's been fun today. I hope you all enjoyed the podcast. I know that we did. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us as well. And with that, like we always say, don't be an okay man.
Be a better man.
Thank you.